Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a stack of research on the table today that is going to force us to do something we rarely do, and that is look backward to understand where we're going.
Yeah, we're usually obsessed with the future here. AI, crypto, the next market crash. We're always looking at the horizon.
Always. But today we're looking at the very ground we're standing on, because the sources we're covering, specifically History of Economic Thought by Landreth and Collender, make a pretty radical point.
They really do. They argue that the economy as we know it, this thing we measure and obsess over, it didn't really exist for most of human history.
Which sounds absurd, doesn't it? Like saying weather didn't exist before weathermen, but what they mean is the concept wasn't there.
Exactly. For thousands of years, we didn't have an economy to analyze. We had, well, survival. And more importantly, we had morality.
Right. We treat the economy today like it's this machine we're trying to tune up. We talk about mechanisms, levers, interest rates.
But for the vast, vast majority of human history, talking about profit wasn't just, rude. It was a sin. It was a fast-track ticket to a very warm place in the afterlife.
And that is the mission for this deep dive. We are tracing the invention of the economy. We're going to see how we went from the ancient Greeks, who thought profit was a dirty word, through the medieval monks, who were absolutely terrified of hellfire.
All the way to Adam Smith, the man who finally gave us permission to be selfish.
It's a journey from "is this a sin?" to "does this work?"
Exactly. The shift from theology to mechanics.
So let's drop into the early pre-classical period. We're talking, 800 BC?
Yeah.
If you and I are walking around Athens, there's no stock market, there's no GDP report. What determines who gets what?
Well, the first thing you have to wrap your head around is that markets were rare. In these early societies, resources weren't allocated by price. You didn't, look at a price tag to decide if you wanted dinner.
You were self-sufficient.
Largely, yeah. If you wanted dinner, you grew it or you killed it.
And if you couldn't?
Then you relied on authority and tradition. If you were a serf, you farmed because your father farmed, and the lord of the manor told you to farm. It was a command economy, but based on social station, not some central plan.
So in that context, how did the big thinkers of the day, the Greek philosophers, view money? I assume they liked having it.
With extreme suspicion. You have to look at Hesiod, one of the earliest Greek poets. He writes works and days, and for him, the economic problem isn't a math problem. It's a curse.
A curse.
It starts with Pandora's box.
Wait, the actual Pandora's box? From the myths?
The very same. He believes scarcity was a punishment from the gods. We have to work and struggle because we unleashed evil onto the world. So right from the jump, economics is tied to suffering.
Not about growth, but about enduring a curse. That sets a pretty dark tone. But the Greeks did coin the word economics, didn't they? Economicus.
They did, thanks to Xenophon. But, and this is a huge but, it didn't mean national economy. Economicus translates to the state management.
So like a household budget.
Exactly. It was a handbook on how to run your household, manage your slaves, plant your olives.
Yeah.
It was about efficiency at the micro level. Stewardship, not national growth.
Okay, so manage the farm well. But surely they traded. Athens was a bustling port. They must have understood profit.
Oh, they understood it. They hated it. This brings us to Aristotle. He is the heavyweight champion of this era. And he draws this line in the sand that defines Western thinking for the next 2,000 years.
And what's the line?
He separates needs from wants.
That sounds like a conversation I have with my kids. You don't need the new video game, you want it.
Aristotle would have been on your side, but he took it to a metaphysical level. He said, needs are natural. You need food, shelter, clothes. These things have a limit. Once you're full, you're full.
Right.
But wants, those are unnatural because they're unlimited. You can always want more gold, more status, more luxury.
And that's where the trouble starts, because you can never be satisfied.
Precisely. Aristotle argued that using money to buy things you need, that's natural household management. But trading just to make money, buying shoes cheap to sell them expensive, that is unnatural.
Why? Because you aren't creating anything, just moving stuff around.
Because money is barren. This is the key metaphor. He looked at a cow and said, look, cows have calves. Nature produces a surplus. You plant a seed, you get a tree.
Okay.
But if you put 2 coins in a box,
Okay.
They don't breed. They don't have little baby coins.
Unless you're a bank charging interest.
Which is exactly why he hated it. If money can't breed, then charging interest is forcing a sterile object to reproduce. It's a crime against nature.
That is a wild way to think about a savings account. It's not smart investing, it's biological perversion.
Essentially, yes. And this idea doesn't die with the Greeks. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, the church takes over. You've got the scholastics, led by St. Thomas Aquinas, and they take Aristotle's barren money and blend it with the Bible.
So now economics isn't just unnatural, it's a ticket to hell.
It became a branch of moral philosophy. The central question for Aquinas wasn't what is the market price, it was what is the just price.
The just price, let's unpack that. If I'm a baker in 1300 AD, I can't just charge whatever people are willing to pay.
Absolutely not. That would be gouging, and gouging is a sin called avarice. The just price was usually calculated as your cost of labor plus materials, just enough to keep you in your social station.
As you can't get rich.
Trying to get rich meant you were exploiting your neighbor's need. You were endangering your immortal soul. It's a mechanism for social stability, not growth.
And this leads to the ban on usury lending money at interest.
Right. And the church's argument was fascinating. If money is barren and I lend you 100 gold coins and ask for 110 back, what is that extra 10 paying for?
Well, today we'd say risk or the time I let you use it.
But the monk said, time belongs to God. Time is not yours to sell. Everyone shares time equally. So if you charge for the time the money is lent, you are literally selling God's time.
That is conceptually beautiful, actually, selling God's time. But it must have been a nightmare for anyone trying to start a business.
It strangled credit markets for centuries. But here's the twist. While Europe is stuck in this moral gridlock, stressing over the souls of bakers, other parts of the world were actually figuring out how markets work.
Right, the source material highlights this. We tend to have this very Eurocentric view, but in China, way back in the 7th century BC, you have Guanzong.
Guanzong is incredible. He's advising the emperor while Greece is still figuring out its alphabet. And he comes up with the light-heavy theory.
Light and heavy, what does that mean?
It's basically supply and demand. He noticed that when goods are abundant, they feel light prices fall. When they're scarce, they become heavy, prices rise.
It's so intuitive, it feels like physics.
It is, but he applied it to money, too. This is the brilliant part. He realized that if the emperor prints too much money, money itself becomes light, and goods become expensive. He basically understood inflation.
And we see similar pockets of brilliance in the Arab world, too, right?
Yes. Al-Ghazali, in the 11th century, writes about how a simple loaf of bread requires the coordination of farmers, millers, bakers. He saw the division of labor long before Adam Smith.
The idea that we are all connected by our work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Ibn Khaldun analyzed how civilizations rise from rural poverty to urban luxury and then collapse. They were analyzing the mechanisms while the West was still obsessing over the morality.
So the rest of the world is doing the math and Europe is doing the praying. But then something snaps. We hit the 1500s, feudalism breaks down, and we get a new group, the mercantilists.
This is the era of gold, guns, and glory. And the vibe shifts completely. We stop worrying about the soul of the individual and start worrying about the power of the state.
I feel like mercantilism is a word people hear in history class and immediately forget, but it's actually a worldview we see a lot today.
Oh, it's very alive. The core belief of mercantilism is the zero-sum game. They believe the total wealth of the world was fixed. It's a pie that doesn't grow.
So for England to get a bigger slice, France must get a smaller slice.
Literally, economic warfare. And the scoreboard was gold. Bullion. They believed that gold was wealth. So the goal of the nation was to accumulate as much of it as possible.
How do you do that if you don't have gold mines?
You trade aggressively. You want a favorable balance of trade. That means you export as much as possible, take their gold in payment, and import. Well, nothing.
This is what the book calls the fear of goods, which seems so backward. Don't we want stuff?
We do,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't. They were terrified of importing because that meant gold was leaving the country. So they slapped tariffs on everything. They suppressed wages at home so they could sell cheap abroad. It was all about hoarding bullion in the king's vault.
It's cynical, but it's logical if you accept the zero-sum premise. But this leads to one of my favorite characters in this whole story, Bernard Mandeville. The source calls him the bad boy of economics.
Mandeville is delightful. He drops a poem in 1714 called The Fable of the Bees, and it just scandalizes everyone. I mean, people wanted him arrested.
Because he attacks virtue itself.
He flips the script completely. His subtitle was Private Vices, Public Benefits. He argues that the things we call sins, greed, vanity, pride, are actually what make a nation rich.
Decades before Wall Street said greed is good, Mandeville is saying vice is vital.
Think about it. He points to the libertine, the guy buying expensive suits, drinking wine, building a massive mansion to show off. Mandeville says that guy is vain and greedy, but his vanity pays the tailor, his greed pays the architect.
And if he became a monk, if he became good,
The economy collapses. In his fable, the bees pray to become virtuous. God grants the wish. They stop competing, they live simply, they stop buying fancy things, and the hive ruins itself. The hive becomes moral, but it becomes poor.
that is the pivot point, isn't it? That's the moment we stop asking how should people behave and start asking how do people actually behave.
Exactly. It forces us to look at self-interest not as a defect, but as an engine. Around the same time, you have William Petty coming in with political arithmetic, saying, stop giving me flowery arguments. Give me numbers.
So we have the cynical philosophy of Mandeville and the hard data of Petty. The stage is set. But before we get to Adam Smith, there's this weird French detour, the physiocrats.
The physiocrats are fascinating because they are the first to really model the economy as a system. Their leader, François Quesnay, was a doctor, a physician to the king's mistress, actually.
And being a doctor mattered.
Huge. He looked at the economy and saw a human body. He saw blood circulating. He realized wealth flows like blood from the farmer to the landlord to the artisan and back again. He drew this up in Tableau économique.
The first economic model, a circular flow of income.
It is. And because they saw it as a natural system, they believed it had natural laws. So they coined the term laissez-faire.
Let it be.
Let it go. They hated the mercantilist tariffs. They wanted free trade. But they made one massive glaring error.
They were obsessed with farming.
Obsessed. They believed that only agriculture produced new value. They looked at a farmer planting one seed and harvesting 100 and said, look, nature gives a net product. But they looked at a guy making a chair and said, he's sterile.
Sterile.
Yes, the sterile class. They thought manufacturing just reshaped things. The carpenter takes wood, makes a chair. He hasn't created new matter, he just rearranged it. So no true surplus value.
Which is so ironic considering the Industrial Revolution is about to kick the door down.
Worst timing in history. But despite that mistake, the insight that the economy is an interconnected flow, that was the breakthrough.
So we've got all the pieces. Self-interest from Mandeville, data from Petty, system thinking from the physiocrats. Then, in 1776, a Scottish philosopher walks in and puts it all together, Adam Smith.
The great synthesizer, the wealth of nations.
Now, the source makes a point that Smith didn't necessarily invent these ideas. He organized them.
That's a fair assessment. He was a genius of organization. He took all these disjointed threads and wove them into a coherent worldview. But he added the secret ingredient that was missing from the mercantilists: optimism.
Optimism. I thought economics was the dismal science.
Not with Smith. Remember, the mercantilists saw a zero-sum game, conflict, war. Smith saw harmony. This is the famous invisible hand.
We have to stop on the invisible hand. It's probably the most misused phrase in history. What did he actually mean by it?
He meant that under the right conditions, your selfishness can help me. He says, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest.
The baker doesn't feed me because he's nice. He feeds me because he wants my money.
Right. But in order to get your money, he has to feed you. He has to bake good bread at a price you're willing to pay. Smith realized the market channel's raw, chaotic self-interest into social benefits.
So he turns the scholastic sin of greed into a social virtue.
Precisely. And he redefines wealth itself. He looks at the mercantilists and says, you're confusing money with wealth. Real wealth isn't the gold in the vault. It's the annual produce of the land and labor. It's the stuff, the bread, the shirts.
The consumer is king, not the king.
Ooh, that's the shift. The purpose of production is consumption.
Now here's where I want to push back a bit, because I think this is where people get Smith wrong. He's the father of laissez-faire, but was he really this anarcho-capitalist who hated all government?
Not at all. And this is the most misunderstood part of Smith. He practiced what the authors call contextual economic policy. He was looking at the real world of 1776.
And what did that world look like?
Corrupt, incompetent, controlled by monopolies. The mercantile system was rigged by rich merchants who bought off politicians to stifle competition. When Smith railed against government intervention, he was railing against cronyism.
So he didn't trust the government because the government was in bed with the monopolists.
Exactly. He supported laissez-faire because, in his specific context, the market was more likely to help the poor than the government was. But he also supported public education, public works, banking regulations. He wasn't a blind ideologue.
That's a crucial distinction. We often project our modern debates back onto him.
We do. We treat him like a prophet who handed down stone tablets.
Mm.
But he was just a guy looking at a corrupt system and saying, if we strip away these privileges and let people compete, the common man will be better off.
So let's zoom out. We started with profit is a sin from Aquinas. We went to profit is a vice but useful from Mandeville. And we ended with profit is the engine of social cooperation from Smith.
It's a massive psychological shift. We stopped trying to fight human nature, stopping people from wanting things, and decided to harness it. We built a machine, the market economy, that runs on the fuel of self-interest.
It's like we built a hydroelectric dam. Instead of yelling at the river for flowing, we put a turbine in it.
That's a perfect analogy. And that shift unleashed the greatest explosion of prosperity the species has ever seen.
So here is the so what for you listening. Why does digging up these old dead guys matter today?
It matters because we are still reenacting their arguments. Every time you hear a politician say, we need to protect our industries from foreign goods, that is pure mercantilism.
And every time we argue about price controls or fair wages.
That's the scholastics coming back. That's the search for the just price. We are constantly torn between the efficiency of Smith and the morality of Aquinas. We want the goods, but we worry about the soul of the system.
We think we're modern, but we're just relitigating the 17th century with better Wi-Fi.
Pretty much. The fundamental questions haven't changed. How do we balance individual freedom with the common good?
Here's a thought to leave you with, and it's a bit of a curveball. And establish that Adam Smith was a contextual thinker. He hated regulation because his government was incompetent and corrupt.
Right.
If Adam Smith were alive today, looking at the complex problems we have, climate change, global supply chains, massive inequality, would he still be a Smithian?
That is the ultimate question. Would the man who invented the invisible hand look at the modern world and say, actually, sometimes you need a visible hand?
Are we loyal to Smith's answers, or should we be loyal to his method?
It's a dangerous question, but one we have to ask.
Something to chew on the next time you tap your card for a coffee. Look for the invisible hand in that transaction. It took about 3,000 years to invent it. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.